There we go. And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the October episode of Apple Exchange. And today we've got a lot that we're going to try to cover related to the Apple software and hardware updates that have been announced and have been flowing out over the course of the last several weeks. In today's Apple Exchange, we intend to provide you with an overview of the major changes that Apple released within that past month. In fact, there's so many components to these updates that we plan to devote both the October and the November episodes to these changes. We'll call these two episodes Apple Updates Part 1 and Apple Updates Part 2. For today's Part 1 episode, we'll be concentrating on the major changes in the software that we believe will have the most impact on our community. There's been a lot of hype and in some cases some angst about some of these changes. So our intent is to inform you about the changes and to attempt to explain our perspective. Hopefully this will relieve some of that angst through some candid feedback and some recommendations. As we go through these updates, please remember that this community is comprised of people with a wide spectrum of blindness and low vision. Some of you are completely blind. Some of you still have residual vision. We seek to inform everyone who's on that spectrum. So some of what we're going to discuss today may not be relevant to you and your particular vision situation. And we appreciate your patience while we go through the spectrum of things that affect everyone there. Now, a few weeks ago, on September 15th, Apple released multiple significant software updates for all of their devices across the entire Apple ecosystem, including iPhones, iPads, Macs, watches, etc. Now, currently, we recommend updating your Apple devices to some of those software updates, but not others. And we'll get into more details of that here shortly. Okay. First thing we want to talk about, though, is the automatic update setting. With most of these releases, Apple's default settings that we believe should be changed by everyone involves the change to your Apple device settings to default to the updates being automatically downloaded and installed as they occur. We believe that that's something you should change so that you're in control of when those updates occur. So we recommend that you turn those automatic updates off. To do that, you want to go to Settings and then General and then Software Update, and then to the automatic updates. Here you will find three different toggle switches. The first one is the setting for iOS updates to be automatically installed, and we suggest you turn that toggle switch off. The next two, one of them is related to automatic downloads. That one, you can choose to leave it on or turn it off because it's only going to download the software, not install it. Then there is a third one, and that is for your system files to be updated and to be automatically installed. That one can also be left to on, since the system file updates generally improve iPhone functionality without changing the software version. All of these changes keep you in control of what's going on with your installation of updates. So the key one is to turn off the automatic updates. The other two, at your discretion, you can leave on or off. And I shouldn't say it that way. All of these are at your discretion. We're just making recommendations that we believe will be in your best interest. Now, Apple changed their software naming conventions with all of these rollouts. They adopted a new naming convention that ties the annual software updates to a common numbering sequence that's tied to the calendar year. So even though this is 2025, Apple is naming everything 26 for the year 2026. That's just like in the automobile industry, where they use the next year to describe the current year's model options and model numbers. The prior numbering systems were all over the place with different numbers in each of the different hardware device platforms. And now they're all going to be on a common set of nomenclature with the number 26 applied to all of the updates going out this year. For example, the prior version of the iOS software on your iPhone or the iOS software on your iPad was iOS 18 or iPad OS 18. The newest edition of the software in this latest release is iOS 26 and iPad OS 26, along with the Apple Watch OS 26 and the Mac OS 26, etc. They skipped right over everything from 19 to 25. Now, while it might seem odd for them to make that kind of a change, it's our opinion that by linking the software naming convention to the calendar years, that it'll simplify things a lot for everyone involved. Now, in addition to the creation and release of the new 26 operating system versions, Apple also released software fixes and security updates for the prior version of all of their operating systems. Those updates, once again, included software fixes and security updates. So, for example, in addition to releasing iOS 26, they issued software update 18.7. They had already done 18.1 through 18.6. And on September the 15th, they issued 18.7. And that included software updates for all of those people who either cannot move forward to the new 26 because their devices may be too old, or those who do not wish to yet update to the new version 26. Now, these latest updates involve an unusually high number of changes, including a whole new design look to the appearance of the operating system, and it permeates across all the devices. And experience has taught us that whenever there's this many significant changes, there's inevitably a lot of programming bugs that don't get discovered until after the public release of the new software. And this year's major software updates are no exception to that. So as a result, we do not recommend yet that our clients update to any of the 26 versions of these various operating systems. Our recommendation is that you stick with the existing versions of the software, which have been numbered 18 for iOS and iPad OS. As such, we suggest that you go ahead and update your phones and iPads with those security and update fixes that were released on September 15th. Those are numbered 18.7.x. Now, put this in perspective. Our most experienced Apple users here at Second Sense, one in particular, who's been using VoiceOver as a blind man for many years, he's got a standard policy of not updating or adopting any of the new software versions until Apple releases the 0.2 version, which can sometimes be a couple of months. Now, that policy is rooted in the fact that these new software updates have always had issues and glitches that don't get identified until after the releases have been made. And people experience those glitches and those errors, and they have to work their way through them. It's harder for those of us in the visually impaired community to always recognize those glitches and work our way through them. So the recommendation is stick with the existing software updates for just security components until we have an opportunity to work through a number of these glitches and have the software updated. Now, Apple's usual software rollout process has involved issuing a series of software updates and fixes within the initial months right after the new software package gets sent out. And those fixes stabilize the newly released software. This year's no exception. We've already seen one update, and there are more that are in the queue. The new 26 versions also received updates. iOS 26.0.1 for the iPhone and iPad OS 26.01 for the iPad. The Watch has even received 26.0.1 and 26.0.2. There's already been 2 quick fixes that have been done for the Watch, all released on September the 29th. So that was 2 weeks after they had issued the initial software. Now, those 0.0 fixes, 0.0.x, are the ones that are basically fixing the issues related to the 26. Apple's already released in beta format and testing versions of 26.1, if you will, the first big follow-on release. And that's supposed to include some new features as well as some additional fixes to the already released software. What's also interesting is that even the 18.7 update that was only to include the security fixes as well as the additional software fixes of the older system, it also received an additional update last week to 18.7.1. That's the stable system that's been in place for a while, not the brand new one. So they already know that they have issues and that they're working on them. And the good news is they are working on them. And one of those that came out in the 26.01 fix on the iPhone was especially important for those of us in our community. Within days of the iOS 26 release on the 15th, multiple voiceover users reported that their phones were completely silent after they initially updated their phones, or even later after they did a restart, even though initially they didn't have a problem. Now, not only did VoiceOver not work in those instances, but no one could find a workaround to get VoiceOver to turn on without the assistance of someone who was sighted. Although the problem was not reported by everyone, the problem was reported by enough people that only 3 days later, on September 18th, Apple acknowledged that there was a problem and that they were working on a fix. And that got reported on Apple Viz. Now, Apple believes that the fix for that issue was included as a part of the iOS 26.0.1, which was released just last week on the 29th of September. Now all we have to do is wait and see whether or not there are any more reports of that issue occurring. But that's a scary thought for those of you who are fully dependent upon VoiceOver, for the phone to be completely dead and not giving you any kind of sound feedback. As a result, AppleViz went very public with the fact that that existed and had been reported, and they did not recommend that people update to the 26 version. We echoed that and said we do not recommend that you update your devices to 26 at this time. Even though they've published a fix, we still need to give that fix as well as any of the other things that have been going on, other glitches that may be reporting and bubbling up to the surface, to get addressed. I don't want to be a complete negative naysayer about all of this. It's a standard part of the process, folks. Whenever you've got this complex of a system with all of the moving parts that the Apple software includes, there's inevitably going to be glitches and things that just didn't surface during their initial testing process. Unfortunately, these are things that do come up after more and more people start utilizing the software. And thankfully, Apple has been very, very quick to go through and make corrections. One of the next things that I want to talk about, though, is even though we're not recommending that you move to it, a number of us here at Second Sense have done so with the intent to learn about it, to experience it, and to develop some insights and guidance for those of you in our community. We know that many of you are very curious about the changes that are included in this new round of the operating system updates. So we want to spend some time today going through what you can expect when you do perform the update. Note that these are not being identified as flaws, but as differences in the new operating system that you will have to adjust to in order to be able to continue using things smoothly. So here's an overview of the biggest changes that we believe can affect how many of you may use your devices. And it's by no means a complete list of all the changes. I have heard a couple of different numbers thrown out there, but all of them are over 100 different changes that they've made, some small, some big. But these are the changes that I'll be going over today are the ones that we believe are the most impactful to this community. The first one of those is called liquid glass. And liquid glass is Apple's term. It's been given a lot of publicity hype. It involves a significant amount of visual change. So frankly, it's either a non-issue for those of you who are blind and completely dependent upon VoiceOver, but it's also a significant visual challenge for those who have low vision. These design changes affect the appearance of icons, of buttons, of controls, of tab bars, giving them reduced contrast so that they blend in with the background. This can make it very difficult, even for those who have good vision, to be able to see those controls. When they initially issued the first beta version, you were stuck with it. You didn't have the opportunity to change it. But they got enough feedback from people with those initial beta versions that they started making the options available for users to be able to turn it down a bit and to turn off the liquid glass effects. For low vision clients, we recommend that you adjust the display to turn on the toggle controls that reduce transparency and increase contrast. This should counteract much of the impact of liquid glass. You can do this by going to Settings, Accessibility, Display and Text Size. And as you scroll down the page, you will find a toggle switch for reduced transparency, which you should turn on, and one for increased contrast, which you should also turn on. Now, in addition to that, liquid glass made a lot of changes to the way the home screen is displayed with all of the different icons for the different apps that you might have on your phone. So we also suggest that you adjust the home screen settings so that your home screen icons remain visible. Because think about it, an almost or nearly transparent icon on a background is going to be difficult for you to be able to see. And this is one of those things that is definitely impactful for those with residual vision who are still trying to look at the screen and use the screen to see what they're doing. Now you can make these changes by first performing a long press on the home screen and then activate the edit button that's in the upper left corner of the screen. That will create a menu, and you want to select Customize from that menu. That menu will pop up in the upper left corner. And the Customize button, I believe, is the second button down. It might be the third. There you will find buttons underneath of that Customize option, or once you select the Customize option, you will find buttons that give the option to choose between the default view, a dark mode view, a clear mode view, and a tinted mode view. And that adjusts the way that the home screen is displayed. And you can pick one of those four to adjust it to your liking. What's interesting about that is that the default view, you consider it, if you will, a daytime or light mode plus the dark mode. The clear mode is just that. And that's the default view that came out with liquid glass originally. The tinted mode literally lets you change the tint from being completely clear to being tinted with, say, a pastel or pale color scheme that you can select to either match the background on your phone or to match the case of your phone. Quite frankly, we do not recommend either the clear or the tinted options because they provide the least amount of contrast and clarity. And for those who have low vision in particular, you need and want as much contrast as possible, not only for you to be able to select what you want to select, but to make it easier on your eyes so that they don't struggle as much to differentiate buttons versus backgrounds. Now, the next phenomenon is I like to call it, where's my buttons? It's my nickname for a raft of different changes that involve things that Apple calls dynamic toolbars, as well as the movement of some buttons around on the screen. This is going to affect both people who are in the low vision camp as well as those who are in the blind camp and who are using the voiceover as their complete interface. The term dynamic in this instance means ever changing, so that things such as your toolbar will change depending upon what it is that you're working on and what it is that you're doing. The buttons morph and change. They're not static. And it makes it so that you might have a hard time initially remembering where specific buttons and controls are located, since they are moving. They're shrinking, expanding, possibly even disappearing. Because depending upon what you're doing, those buttons may not be of relevance anymore. So that's why they use the term dynamic. but that can be problematic if you have depended upon your memory to know where buttons are located. Now, one application that this particular change impacts significantly is Safari. The tab views and the tab setting that they changed it to is called a compact view. In that compact view, the search bar and the controls, backwards, forwards, share, those sorts of control buttons, all of those are morphed into one row and one button. And the display of that row changes depending upon what it is you're trying to do. There are two other choices, though, in the selections. One of them is bottom, where the search bar and the controls each have their own separate row that is static and it's at the bottom, or top, where the top setting, where the search bar is on the top and the controls are on the bottom. Okay. Now, in either the bottom or the top setting, the control buttons are static and consistent with what you've been used to in iOS 18 and prior, where, for example, there's 5 buttons and they're all in the same equidistant spacing to each other. To revert the setting to a more static view, you just need to go to System, Apps, Safari, and then scroll down to Tabs. Once you're in Tabs, you can select either the bottom or the top view instead of the default compact view. Okay, now in addition to that, the phone app has been changed to what is called a unified view. And that combines favorites, recent calls, and voicemail into one combined toolbar at the bottom. Now, while that combines several communication-based components together into one little interface, it can be a little confusing at first. If you prefer the classic arrangement of the buttons, you can change the phone controls back to that classic view by going to Phone and then Calls. And then you get to activate the filter button in the upper right corner. And when you're in that filter button, you have the choice of either the unified view or the classic view. We would suggest that if you prefer the classic view, you tap the classic button. Now that filter option also allows you to change the list of phone calls that are there to include all calls, only the missed calls, or only spam calls. You can also access through that filter control a link to other filter controls that are using things like the Managing Filter button in that menu. Now, along the same line, the default view in the Mail app changed back in iOS 18 when it first came out to where there is a categories view versus a list view. And the categories view in the Mail app changed it to where the system automatically categorized the inbox so that things from, if you will, sales organizations were grouped together and from people was grouped together, things of that nature. And some people liked that. Others didn't like it very much at all. And they wanted to have that classic view where the inbox has everything in it. I think the biggest reason for that is that if you forgot that it was in a filtered view, you wouldn't necessarily see all of your emails. But if it's in that classic view, you're seeing everything. You can still change the view back to the classic list view, which will include all of your emails, regardless of who the sender is. Okay, so you have the choice still, but that was a change that kind of came out in 18, and some people are still trying to struggle with it, but that's very similar to a number of the changes that are coming through now with the 26. Some more changes. The search bar has been moved to the bottom of the screen in a number of apps like Messages, Mail, Notes, Contacts, and others. Now that search bar includes a dictation button within the search bar, or you can simply double tap the search bar to get the standard iOS keyboard to display on the bottom of the screen, and that also has a dictation button. Many of the historical standard menu bars or tab bars, depending upon what application you were in, they were called different things, but they were at the bottom of the screen in a single row of equally spaced buttons. And those have now been changed to group the buttons together in what Apple believes is an improved workflow. However, if you're one of those people who's come to expect certain buttons to always be in certain places, you will need to explore the menu bars to make sure that you know where those buttons and controls are now located, because they might have morphed a little bit. And in a number of Apple's native apps, the buttons appear to have either moved to different locations or to have disappeared. This means that you may have to get reacquainted with where some of the buttons that you've been using are now located. If you use the swipe gesture in VoiceOver as a way of moving around on the page, then the buttons that you've come to expect are generally still going to be there. They're just going to potentially be in a different sequence order. However, you may have to do a bit of drag and hunt type of exploring with one finger touching the screen and moving around in order to find where the buttons are located versus where they used to be. For example, in the camera app, they have truncated the different buttons down to group them into either video or photo. Then within photo, for example, you can double tap on the photo button and then get to the options to change several of the other photo related settings. You can also get a search button that'll help you gain access, for a quick access, if you will, to searching your photos. Some more phone related changes to the phone app. In addition to the unified layout that we talked about earlier, there's some new features in the phone settings, some of which could be quite beneficial. Call screening can be set up for unknown incoming calls, where the phone will pick up the call and ask for the caller's name and the reason for their call even before it rings for you to answer. If a call comes in, there is an unknown caller list now, so that calls from unknown parties that are not in your contacts can now appear in a separate list of inbound calls. You can then review that list and mark any number so that the future calls or texts from that number will appear in your normal call list. So you can take somebody out of your unknown caller and put them into your known callers. So you might get a phone call in from a plumber that you've contacted, and even though that plumber's not in your contacts list, you know that it's a valid number. So at that point, you can change it so that that plumber, they may still not be in your contacts list, but at least they won't be considered an unknown caller. There's also a new feature called Hold Assist. That feature will keep your spot in line when you're in some sort of a hold queue. And once a live person comes on the phone app will ring to let you know that they're ready, while also letting the caller know that you'll be there shortly. There's also a new More button that will let you access controls for things like call recording and live translations. And voicemail summaries are now provided by Apple Intelligence. The Messages app also has some interesting changes. And some of those, there's one that I don't particularly care for. To me, that's kind of bad news. And then there's some others that are good news. First, the bad news. So backgrounds, the background that goes behind the text bubbles that would appear on the screen, can be modified by any participant so that they appear on the screen for anyone who's included in the message group. Now, while some people might think that that's cute, or that allows you to share some shared views of things in the background, the wrong background image can potentially lead to a significantly poor contrast for a low vision user. I'll use an example. Consider that the lack of contrast that a background photo of a white sandy beach might have when the text font color is a light color. Then you've got a light colored text on a light colored background. For someone who has low vision, that's a nightmare. But there's also some good news. Now, you can change those. Anybody in the text group can change them. So you can have a little duel with who's going to change to what photo in what order. But there's separately some other good news, and that is that you can screen unknown senders And there are now on-device spam filters that learn from your actions how to filter out any unwanted messages. You can also now perform polls with group texts. So if you're trying to find out from a group of people on the text where they want to go for dinner or anything along that line, you can do that sort of polling together. It'll automatically pop up for you. There is also now a draft text messaging filter. This is one that I personally like a lot. It allows you to quickly find, reopen, and finish editing a text that you may have started but didn't send. It's happened to me a number of times where I started a text message, didn't hit send, I got preoccupied, and then I want to go back to that text message and I can't find it. Well, the problem is that what Apple has been doing is deleting those drafts because they didn't have a folder or a mechanism for holding the draft. Now they do. And you can easily go to a drafts listing of your text messages, find the one you need, and go ahead and re-edit it and finish editing it and send it. There's some other accessibility specific changes that I think are worthwhile to mention. And remember that in Apple's terminology of accessibility, it's not just vision related accessibility, but they have accessibility issues or accessibility features for those with hearing concerns, as well as those with motor concerns, et cetera. I'm going to be talking about the vision ones first here for a minute. Okay. They have one of the things that they've announced is the accessibility nutrition labels. Now, those nutrition labels are designed to show up in the App Store in order to help users make informed choices when selecting apps based on the app developer's self-reported ability to provide accessible functionality. By that, I mean, does it work with VoiceOver? Does it work with Voice Assist? Does it work with any one of the different accessibility functions that are out there? Now, those nutrition labels are currently voluntary. Apple is not mandating that the developers create them. And I'll be honest, in these first few weeks, I've had limited success in finding apps that have those nutrition labels. I have found a few though, and in those cases, it provides good information. Information that you can then use as a basis for knowing whether or not that particular app will work with the accessibility features that you use. Apple has said that they may require those of developers in the future, but for right now, they're voluntary. Another feature that has been rolled out is something called Accessibility Reader. Now, to me, it appears that this new feature is redundant if you're using VoiceOver, because VoiceOver, you can already have the phone read everything to you. But this accessibility reader provides the user with the ability to have anything on the phone system-wide either read aloud and or presented in a more user-friendly font. So if you happen to be using Safari and you're on a website and they've chosen a serif font or something that's really small, you could use this accessibility reader to be able to literally identify what you want changed, and then it will change it to a more accessible and readable font. And you can go in and preset the size and the type of font involved, or you can have it read to you. And that is system-wide throughout the entire applications on the phone. That one's one that I think is going to be worth playing around with, especially for those who are still still use their residual vision and may not have yet transitioned over to using VoiceOver. One other feature that is very interesting and has not had as much hype as I would have thought. It's called Braille Access. This new feature is touted as a new way for Braille users with connected Braille displays to interact with the Braille devices. And as I said, I'm not much of a Braille user myself, but the feature apparently allows users to quickly take notes, read documents, access live captions, launch apps, as well as a number of other tasks. Unfortunately, it's been reported on AppleVis that there are a few glitches with this particular feature. For example, the live captions don't work on FaceTime. And in addition, typed characters are sometimes missed when they were typed in using a Perkins style keyboard. So that's one of those areas that I think they're going to be making some additions to and modifications to in order to eliminate those glitches. So in summary, while we've concentrated today on just the iOS side, there's also similar changes that can be seen in the iPad OS. For those of you who use both an iPhone and an iPad, many of the same things that we talked about today on the iPhone will also be experienced on the iPad. And while we didn't try to cover all of the changes that are inherent with the OS 26, there are a lot of other smaller changes, as well as some changes that, even though they're larger, we didn't think that they were necessarily as critical or important to this community. In the grand scheme of things, the software glitch issues that have been reported via AppleVis are not really all that large in number. So, and AppleVis is specifically trying to target those things that are relevant to the vision and visually impaired community. They're not all that large in number, but a couple of those that were reported were fairly significant. And I go back to that fix related to the fact that Apple, VoiceOver would not start up after putting in the iOS 26. But Apple was really quick. Within a matter of 2 weeks, they issued a fix to that. I believe that that's fairly unprecedented. So they knew that they had an issue and they fixed it fairly quickly. There are more software fixes and updates that are already under beta development and in that pipeline. And to be clear, most of the issues that we discussed today are not really software glitches. They're just simply changes in the way that the new iOS 26 software is designed to work. Luckily, there are adjustments that you can make to mitigate the changes that could be problematic. We tried to outline those issues for you. We also tried to identify the adjustments that you can make in order to make it more palatable and usable for you. Having said that, some of the changes that involve things, for example, like where the buttons are located and how the controls are interfacing and where they're showing up on the screen, those are things you're simply just going to have to experience and explore yourself and become accustomed to once you make the conversion to iOS 26. We hope that by next month's episode, Apple will have released at least 26.1. They seem to be moving fairly quickly. If you do decide to install the new iOS software, we hope that you will now be forearmed with some of the biggest changes. One of the things that I would be remiss if I didn't say, and I've tried to include this in all of my Tech Exchange emails that I've been sending out to our listserv. Before you make any kind of software update, you should back up your phone. You should already have the process basically made available to you to back up to iCloud, and if not, to your computer. And make sure you do that backup before you perform any update. That ensures that if anything goes wrong in the process, you have a backup that you can refer back to. In the meantime, we continue to recommend that you only update to 18.7.1 and that you have patience so that more of the bugs and the glitches can be resolved by Apple. Now that's the end of my prepared comments. I hope that that's been enough for people to chew on and to tease you a little bit about the things that are in the pipeline. I want to open it up for questions and comments at this point. So I want to go back over the instructions for people to be able to do that. If you want to unmute yourself and you're on the phone, press *6. If you're on a PC, the command is Alt-A for audio. If you're on a Mac, the command is Command-Shift-A. If you're on a smartphone or a tablet, the mic button is in the lower left corner of the display of the Zoom controls. If you want to raise your hand, we've already got one hand up, but if you are also wanting to comment and you want to raise your hand, if you're on the phone, use *9. If you're on your PC, the command is Alt-Y. On a Mac, it's Option-Y. And on a smartphone or tablet, again, in the menu at the bottom of the screen, but in the middle of the screen is where you'll find the Reactions button. And the first component under the Reaction button is going to be the ability for you to raise your hand. So, Jeff, you've got your hand up. I'd like for you to go ahead and tell us what your comment and or question is.
Well, first of all, thank you, Eric. That was a great explanation. Looking forward to part two with the iPhone 17s coming out. Wondering what we'll look forward to what your thoughts are. Would assume in November on that. And then my question is, I think I heard you correctly. So if I do the update to 18 point whatever it is, 18.7.1, do I need to back everything up if I do that? And if so, what's the quickest way to do that?
Okay. Yes, Jeff, we were recommending that people do the 18.7. Okay. And in order to do a backup, if you would go into settings, okay, and then you can go to your name, which is at the very top of the settings command. Okay. And then you want move down about 5 items to iCloud, and then about half a dozen, maybe a few more items down on the iCloud list, you will see iCloud Backup. And you
Oh,
can press that button and you can initiate a backup at any time. Many phones are set up to do an automatic backup overnight to where it's just an automatic, it's going to do a
mhm.
backup each day for you, but you can do an intentional backup by going through those steps. Okay.
Okay. And then how do we know if we have enough capacity on the iCloud for what's on our phone?
Okay. When you go to those iCloud settings, it will tell you at the very top what your storage level is with your iCloud. So, for example, mine, the storage button is the very first button down and it says 29 of 50. So
Okay.
it'll tell you a number and it'll tell you of your total capacity.
Okay. Okay. Um, and it'll basically say like if you know you're backing up 14 gigabytes, well 29 and 14 is less than 50, so I'm okay type of thing.
Yes. And
Okay.
and actually once you tap that if you will, if you tap that storage button, then one of the things that happens is that it will tell you how much has been used, and of that, how much of it is used in, for example, backing up backups, or if you will, the copy of the backups, or of the iCloud photos, or your iCloud Drive, or any of the other things that might be taking up a significant amount of your iCloud storage.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much, Eric.
You're quite welcome. Does there anyone else have a question or a comment? Don't be bashful, folks.
Eric, if can you hear me?
Oh,
I
yeah.
can.
If you don't mind, if there's no other questions, I'll wait till the end. But if you could preliminarily talk about the iPhone 17, that would be awesome.
Okay. Actually, that is something that I had decided that we were going to have as our contact or part of our content for the next month's call.
Perfect.
But I will give you a lead in to the fact that, yes, at the same time or literally a week or two ahead of that, Apple had their announcements of their new hardware, and they did include the, if you will, the numeric sequence of the 17s. And I believe there are 4 different models within the 17, each having different characteristics and capabilities and price points. So, one of the things that we anticipate going into next month is the ability to go through the different types of devices that are a part of that suite with some information so that people can then make some informed decisions as to which of those they might be interested in changing to.
Eric,
Yes.
when you had said talking about switching the display for the for phone, uh, to change that you go into settings and phone, or do you get there right from the screen itself?
It's from the phone app, but on the bottom of the phone app, you have to go into not your favorites tab, but to the recents tab.
Ooh, so they don't have that setting in settings.
No, sir. That setting is actually on the display portion, similar to the way that Mail has the ability for you to go with the
List or
groupings
categories.
or
Yeah.
categories. That's on the Mail app. On the phone app is where you get to change the view of whether you want that unified view or whether you want that classic view.
Okay. So it's unlike, so like they had in the settings in the phone app, whether when a call comes in, whether you want the banner or full screen, where that's in settings. But
Hmm.
but for that view, it's on, yikes.
Yeah.
All right.
So, and that's actually a good lead-in comment. Um, while generally speaking, Apple is consistent about where control changes are, and those are typically found under settings. And then within settings, if they are system wide and they're not app specific, then they're on the main settings page. But if they are app specific, you then have to go into settings and then scroll all the way down to the bottom to the apps option. And then within apps, you can select which app it is that you're trying to look at. There are certain settings, and this component of the way that the phone display is set up, that are not there in settings. They are actually something that you
On the
control
screen.
in the app itself.
So in settings, have they changed it? Is it still the same way as an 18, where settings has, the system things, and then apps are at the bottom? Is that stayed the same?
That has stayed the same.
Nice.
So when you go into settings, all of the more, if you will, uniform and generic that cross over multiple apps, all of those settings are up at the top. The things like airplane mode, Wi-Fi,
Yep.
Bluetooth, and then they get into general and accessibility and things like the action button, camera, search and standby, those sorts
Display.
of things. Right. Then underneath of that, as you continue to move down, there is a button at the very bottom of the list that is apps. And once you activate that, at that point, the very top item is default apps, kind of like on your computer where you can default it as to which browser to use or which app you want to use to look at PDFs, for example. In Apple now, you can set default apps for things like mail and messaging and calling and call filtering and the browser and things of that nature. Immediately underneath of that button for default apps is an alphabetical listing of every app that's on your phone that has any kind of options that you can change,
Including theirs. Like some there's
including theirs.
phones got some, mail's got some, messaging.
Exactly. So just scrolling down briefly on my list that's in front of me right now, if I go into the C's, for example, calendar has its own button there under apps. And I can go in at that point and change things that are showing up in the calendar.
Have you noticed any calendar changes between
Um,
26 and 18?
there are a couple that they mention in, so they Apple has actually issued their own documents about changes on things. And give me 1 second. I actually have a document here that I'm going to do a quick scan through. Um, because I do remember seeing something, but it wasn't all that significant at the
Yeah,
time.
because I like the
Um,
18's calendar a lot.
right. Um, don't blame you. Um, actually, no, I'm not seeing one for calendar.
Great.
There are some changes for things like clock and dictation. So, for example, with dictation, you can now spell with your voice. So you can proactively dictate the spelling of words that are in US English that might have a unique or some unique spelling or some commonly spelled that are commonly spelled in multiple ways. So
Or
for example,
names,
my name Eric, I've seen it typed out as ERIC, ERIK, ERICK, and all those sorts of things. Well, when you're dictating and you're trying to dictate someone's name like mine, it can be spelled multiple ways. Well, you can now use your voice to dictate things separately. But those are the kinds of smaller things that I didn't think I'd have time to go into a lot of today. I already mentioned the adaptive toolbar and things like notes and things of that nature. But actually, now that I go back through this list, Marv, to answer your question, calendar is not one that they identified some specific changes are for in 26.
because I know between 17 and 18, it's like, okay, I figured it out. And they said, I think they got it right this time, so don't screw it up. Yeah.
Okay.
What about App Store?
What about App Store?
I know that, because they every now and then they tweak that quite a bit. And
I haven't noticed a lot of changes in the App Store, to be honest
great.
about it. So I think that one is one that has, if it is changed, it's changed very subtly. I have to also say, in all candor and honesty, once a user like myself does change over to the 26, and I'm trying to use it and explore with it to where I could make commentaries in today's session, um, after literally the first few days or the first week, it all starts to look normal to you.
Sure.
And I don't necessarily remember all of the nuances of what was different before versus now. Okay. So in some cases, some things stuck out like a sore thumb. It was very easy to see, like the dynamic tabs and the dynamic toolbars. Those were very easy for me to be able to say, whoa, that's different. And that might be troublesome for people who
Yeah.
just remember where all the buttons are and they immediately move to where they think they are.
Did they take
But
away the keypad in the phone app for the in the that modern view, whatever they have, or do you have to go back to classic to have keyboard?
no, no, no. The keyboard is still there and pops up at the bottom of the screen. But what starts is that there is a search box, and that search box, think of it as a long, narrow oval that's side to side, like a tube with
Gotcha.
rounded corners on either end. And in the far right-hand end of it, inside that tube, is the icon for dictation. But if you double tap on that search box, it will open up a keypad for you to then be able to type in what you want to type in.
Well, but I mean, like in phone, the dial pad.
Yeah.
So is because in 18 and prior for since forever
Hmm.
that was like the fourth tab
Yep.
over.
Now, in the quote unquote classic view, it is the fourth pad over. If I change to unified, it's only the third. Because in the unified view, you have a button for calls, a button for contacts, and a button for keypad.
Okay, and voicemail is not there then.
No, voicemail's not there. And what's on the display at the top, in my case on my phone, I have several numbers that are favorites for, key people in my life.
Oh yeah.
And those icons take up the top half of the screen. And then under that is the recents. So it's kind of morphed
Oh,
all into one
oh, good
one
Lord.
display, which makes it difficult for anyone who is used to
Yeah.
having things displayed in a certain way,
Well,
which
that
is
phone
why
hasn't changed since like iOS 5.
right, it's
Yeah, I
forever.
mean,
So if you hit that filter button in the upper right corner, you can then select whether you want the unified view that they default to, or you can go to the classic view. And then even within the classic view, you get to filter whether what you want the list to display is your calls, your missed calls, your spam, or there's another button that's at the bottom that is to manage filtering.
hmm
And when you press the manage filtering, it literally takes you into the settings and then into apps and then into phone.
phone. Okay,
And then you are in the phone settings where you can at that point change the filtering components
right.
of how things are displayed, but not necessarily those other pieces. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds like that's it's actually uh, probably for a lot of people will go back to classic, but it means that you can still take care of some good stuff either way.
You can. And that's why one of the reasons that and I tried to say this in the right way, and I think it's worth reiterating here. Although part of the point of my commentary is um, you know, here be dragons, things have changed kind of thing, right?
Yep.
I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to warn those of you who are either A, voiceover users, or B, somebody who may have residual vision, but you're dependent upon a memory of where certain buttons are located and how they're arranged
Yeah.
on the screen. And that's why I use that euphemism of "where's my buttons?"
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
things are not necessarily where you thought they were. So take your time, explore the screen, and you'll be able to find it. And with more usage, you'll get more accustomed to it.
Mhm.
It's just different.
Yeah, because sometimes the new way is actually more logical as far as like where it goes. There's an app I use all the time. They move some things from the bottom to the top at first, like where the heck? And then
Yeah.
once when I saw where it was like, oh, this actually I like it.
Hmm.
Mm.
But it took more messing around, because I couldn't just see it. I
Hmm.
had to.
Well, and I don't mean to pigeonhole everybody into one big group, but some people rely on their memory of what buttons are located where.
Oh, I
And
do.
Mhm.
when you change the way those buttons are displayed on the screen, it can be frustrating and or annoying at first. And you just have to get used to the new arrangement. It was kind of like not an Apple issue, but when Seeing AI came out
Oh
6 months
yeah,
Oh,
ago and
yeah, right.
changed their interface from having 10 buttons to only having three,
or having
and
the
then
Mm.
underneath
swiping.
of one of them
Yeah,
went to
Yeah,
seven.
they took the swiping away.
yeah.
That was just a new method of interacting with the app. This is in many ways very similar
Hmm.
because Apple is giving us a new way of interfacing with those apps.
But at least they're not taking getting rid of the classic altogether. They're still giving people the choice, to do that, which because
Com-
Excuse me,
sometimes,
this is
complete
some
Karen. I have
vendors
a
will just
question.
get rid of it and it's like, sorry, you're,
right. Com-
SOL.
And this,
Completely agree.
Hmm.
Go. I,
and
I
this is
hear
Karen. I
someone
have
else trying
a-
to chime in.
Hey,
Yes,
Sharon, you have a question,
Karen, I
right?
have a question. Yeah,
Go ahead.
sorry about that.
Okay.
Thank you, Eric, for the presentation. Could you please send it to me, Karen Rose?
Well, I can, but one of the things that we are trying to do is to take the recordings from all of these sessions and put them out on our
No,
YouTube
YouTube
channel.
channel. Oh,
So
okay.
as soon as within the next week or two, it should be put out onto the YouTube channel. Okay.
Oh, okay. And is a tablet one on there too? 'Cause you did the tablet like a couple of months ago.
Yes. We're
Oh,
we're
good.
we're trying to gradually catch up and put the ones that we have made on all the recordings and put them out onto that page.
Oh, okay. So the
So
second sense on YouTube.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
So use a little patience because not all of them are out there, but we
Uh-huh.
we are trying to get them put out there fairly quickly. Okay.
Okay, that's a
Hmm.
good idea. Thank you.
Eric,
Sure. Yes.
this is Pam Berman. I really appreciate you explaining as you have the differences because I got a new phone I don't know about 2 weeks ago, and then not long after I got my new phone, I went out of town. So I was able to still function. I mean, I noticed some changes like with messages. I was searching for a message and I couldn't even find where to search. And there it is down on the bottom. It's really simple. And I noticed a change in the phone, but I'm still able to use the phone. So I could I haven't really been able to put my finger on exactly what changed.
Hmm.
So I'm gonna have to go back and look. I guess I'm probably in unified because I do sometimes look at my phone and it'll say calls and then
Right.
I looked and it said recent. So
Yeah.
I
So let me point out a couple of things. Number one, if you've purchased a new iOS or a new 17 phone,
yes.
you will be required with the 17 to use the new 26. They're not letting you go back to the other
18.
older operations. Okay.
Right.
So
Hmm.
if you do purchase a new phone, you will be required to use the new iOS 26.
Yeah.
The second thing is that um, many of the same all of the voiceover gestures that we have all come to know and love, like the two finger double tap to answer the phone and to hang up the phone, those sorts of things, none of that changed.
Nope.
Correct.
No.
All of that is still operating the same way.
Oh,
The
okay.
kinds of things that are the most impactful is the where's my buttons component. And then if you have low vision, the whole issue of how do I make the screen
So you can
as
see it.
legible for me as I need to.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, it
Those are
sounds
the
like
key
those
things.
people, it's a rougher, a little harder road to hoe for, um, for low vision people.
I would tend to agree with you there. So which I'm really glad when they first issued the first beta versions of iOS 26, you didn't have those options. You were
Oh man.
still required to use, or the
Mm.
initial ones had just the transparency versions. And
Wow.
unfortunately, well, fortunately, a lot of people said you can't do that. There's too many people that need contrast. So they made sure that in the accessibility settings, with the ability to increase contrast and reduce transparency by turning both of those toggle switches
Yeah.
on,
I mean, some
you
people wanting
have
high contrast, not low contrast.
exactly. Exactly. And this is very reminiscent of the Apple Vision goggles because
Mm.
much of the aesthetic, if I may use that term, for what is now in iOS is very reminiscent and similar to what you would see in the Apple Vision glasses, which is the large headset where everything is superimposed in front of you, but you can, if you still have vision, you can see through the lenses that are in front of you, and all these buttons are now up on your screen like a heads-up display.
Well, it's just like when they moved Safari around a couple versions ago. Boy, did they get blowback.
Mhm.
If you remember when they put the address bar on the bottom, it wasn't
Mhm.
just blind people. Sight people were
Mm.
going bananas,
Yeah, right.
and they weren't having it to be changed at first, and then people really pushed back hard on them. So Apple's kind of learning from these things. If you change things too much without people being able to find a way to get at least what they're used to, that you're going to get unhappy customers. And what Apple does not want is unhappy customers.
Right,
You
right.
know, Eric, this is Pam again. I just want to say that I purchased my phone for the first time at the Apple store. So they set it up for me or got me started. Um, and then when I went home and I did struggle with a few things, I would call the accessibility number, and they have been absolutely
Oh
wonderful.
yeah,
And
they're
Yeah,
great.
yeah, they're awesome.
I mean, I feel that people need to remember that if you're struggling, they're just awesome about hopping on your phone and really helping to learn how to do it yourself. I mean, they're
Yeah.
just fantastic.
Yeah, those
I'm
screen shares are great. That they
Mm.
can do.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear you say
yeah.
that, Pam, and I would reiterate that and echo it. The Apple support desk, they've always been very well staffed with well-trained people. And even if you get a hold of something or an issue and you try to call them and the person that you first get on the phone doesn't know, they are always willing to find somebody who does.
Absolutely.
And they
Yeah.
send you documents if there's something that you've talked about, and there's a document. They send you back, a link for a document you can get to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
no, they were just fantastic. Some of them I wish I could call and talk to them again because they were just.
Right.
I mean, it's like
Mm.
a teacher, like
Mhm.
one on one. I mean, I couldn't believe how much time they took up with me, helping me to like navigate my phone and put passwords back in.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just fantastic,
Yeah.
and that's why I love Apple.
Yep.
All right.
We're
Well,
preaching to the choir here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we are. This whole group are all Apple users. That's why we call it the Apple Exchange. But
Yep.
we're now at 10 minutes past the hour. I want to be
Uh,
respectful of everybody's time. This is great conversation. Next month, like I said at the beginning, next month we're going to be doing, if you will, part two. And as a part of that, I do want to go into the different hardware options available with the new phones. but I'm also hoping that Apple will have come out with at least, if you will, 26.1, in which case we'll be able to talk about some of those updates and some of the additional changes that are all related to this operating system. As I also mentioned earlier, it's not just the iPhone, and we concentrated today on the iPhone, but there are similar changes that are available on the other hardware platforms like the iPad. And some of our community does use the iPad as well as the iPhone with the voice over assistive tech access. So I want to be sure next month to try to deal with both the phone models as well as the, if you will, the other hardware components, as well as any new software developments that have come through. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Yeah.
I hope you found it worthwhile, and come back again next month for our part 2.
That's the plan.
All right then.
Thank you,
Take
Eric.
care.
All right.
You're very welcome, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.